So, the 2010 Formula 1 season, one of the better seasons in recent years. Unpredictable racing, different race winners, and the championship battle that went right down to the wire to the finale in Abu Dhabi. Honestly, still not mad that Alonso didn't win the title that season. Still not mad. Just... Whilst the major talking point coming into the season was the return of the 7-time Formula 1 world champion Michael Schumacher for Mercedes, we also saw the introduction of 3 new Formula 1 teams: Lotus F1, Virgin Racing and Hispania Racing. The team that we will focus on out of the 3 in this video is Hispania Racing, more commonly known as HRT, and why they were always doomed from the start. So, Hispania Racing. Well, the origins of the team lie with Adrian Campos, a former racing driver who competed in the Formula 3000 series, participated in 21 Formula 1 Grand Prix with Minardi, and he also competed in the 1997 24-hour of Le Mans. He originally collaborated with Enrique Rodriguez to launch a Spanish-based F1 team, which would be the very first Spanish F1 team on the F1 grid. With Campos having a racing operation already set up, known as Campos Racing, and that competed in multiple championships prior to F1, running in the GP2 series, the feeder series to Formula 1 at the time, and the Spanish Formula 3 series, whilst Rodriguez was working with a Madrid-based sports agency known as Meta Image, who managed Bruno Mendes, who raced for Campos in the European Formula 3 Championship. Additionally, the team gained shareholders in Spanish businessman Jose Ramon Garbante and former basketball players Jorge Garbajosa and, at the time, a 2-time NBA All-Star and NBA champion Pau Gasol. I hope I haven't butchered any of those pronunciations. And, well, thank God he was half decent at basketball. So, all sounds good so far. Clear identity, plans in place, investment, and to further cement the good news, on the 12th of June 2009, they were announced as one of 3 new teams to join the F1 grid for the 2010 season. So, why an entry into the 2010 Formula 1 season? With the proposition of a cost cap being introduced to the sport in 2010, it made it appealing for Campos to submit an entry into F1. So what did the 2009 F1 teams think about the £40 million budget cap? Well, we're not here to talk about those teams, we're here to talk about Adrian Campos and his Spanish F1 team dream. So, in order for a Formula 1 team to run, they do kind of need a driver. And at the 2009 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, Bruno Senna was announced as the team's first driver. The iconic Senna name back in Formula 1. This seemed like a very good move. And with Dallara building the car, you know, things seemed good despite the cost cap not being enforced for the season. But as the title suggests, yeah, this really wasn't promising at all. So in December 2009, Bernie Ecclestone expressed concerns about 2 of the prospective entries for the 2010 Formula 1 season: the USF1 and the Campos entry. And boy, Bernie was right. The USF1 entry didn't even get off the ground properly. It was doomed as well from the start. Whilst the Campos entry, well, they were having some financial difficulties. The team feared that they would miss pre-season testing and that a second driver would not be announced until the eve of the first race of the season in Bahrain. When a team fears that they'll miss pre-season, it's usually a bad omen for how the rest of the season will go. Tony Teixeira, who was the A1 GP chairman, he was interested in opening up a revenue stream for the team, investing in the team, and if he was able to do this, he claimed that the team would be ready for the second pre-season test, but also for the race opener at Bahrain. However, this did not come to fruition, as Teixeira believed that there was resistance from teams on the grid.
Stop the cap!
Additionally, the team was paying Dallara €7 million, and Campos stated, "Sometimes we have the money, sometimes we don't." Now, I'm no business expert, but you can see what I mean. They were doomed from the start. We haven't even got to pre-season testing yet, and the team was already on the brink. Eventually, majority shareholder Carbonette, he took full control from Campos, and the team was renamed to Hispania Racing F1 team. And Hispania launched their challenger, the F110, on March 4th, with Karun Chandhok also announced the same day to be Bruno Senna's teammate. So there was some progress, but well, Bahrain was gonna be a baptism of fire for them. Bruno Senna was able to do 3 installation laps in the first practice session, and in the second one he was able to do 17 laps, albeit 11 seconds off the pace, and complaining that a wheel had come loose. Well, what about his teammate Karun Chandhok? Well, he didn't complete a single lap. Qualifying, well, they locked out the back row of the grid, with Chandhok 1.7 seconds slower than his teammate Senna, and a whole 8 seconds behind pole sitter Sebastian Vettel. The race, well, I guess it's somewhat of a success, I suppose, considering where they were before the start of the season. You know, to actually get on to the track and actually start a race, you know, credit where credit's due, even if they were ridiculously slow and very unreliable. The lack of funds available for the team meant that development of the car was, well, it didn't happen at all. And also the lack of funds, the finances, meant that the team used 4 drivers throughout the 2010 season. In addition to Senna and Chandhok driving the car, we had Sakon Yamamoto and Christian Klein. You know, with that revolving door, so to speak, of many drivers taking that Hispania seat, meant that there was a lack of continuity with the team, and in theory a driver wasn't really allowed to feel comfortable with the car, no matter how terrible it was. But it also shows that the revolving door drivers meant that they desperately needed money, with Christian Klein describing the car as not quite on F1 standard. Despite this, they finished P11 in the Constructors' Championship. They finished ahead of Virgin Racing, so there was that. Oh, and there was this from Karun and Monaco. Bruh. Yeah, so that whole 2010 season was a true baptism of fire. So 2011, you know, a year's experience on the grid, surely the only way is up, I suppose, for Hispania. Okay, so they failed at acquiring the 2010 Toyota car that Toyota would have used in a 2010 F1 season. But surely a bit of positive news? Okay, 2 drivers, even if it is Narain Karthikeyan and Vitantonio Luizzi. But what about the car? Oh, not again. So just like last season, the car made its debut at the opening race of the event, this time in Melbourne. And well, they failed to qualify. Bruh. But what about the next race at Malaysia? Well, both cars managed to qualify, so progress. Despite the double DNF at Malaysia, results did improve by their standards and the standards of the other two teams around them as well, with a notable highlight being a P13 for Luizzi at Canada. Arthur Kane did actually cross the line P14 that race, but then received a time penalty demoting him to 17th. Albeit the highlight of their season might be the introduction of Daniel Ricciardo at Silverstone. Ricciardo replaced Arthur Kane till the end of the season, with the exception of the Indian Grand Prix where Arthur Kane was allowed to race in his home country, replacing Antonio Luizzi. But Ricciardo impressed against his more senior teammates, so thank you HRT for giving Danny Rick a chance in F1. But ultimately, where did they finish in the constructors? So the same as last season then. So far we've learned no progress, no points, and still running at the tail end of the field. Bring on 2012. So 2 drivers, good start. Keeping Arthur Kane, which is interesting considering he was dropped for the second half of the season bar his home race, but interesting. And Della Rosa, experience, been around for time, mainly as a test driver, but experience. So what about the car, the F112? Surely, 3rd time lucky. Surely they completed some laps at pre-season testing. Ah, for fuck. Alright, we've had an understanding that HRT usually skip pre-season testing, and they usually just do their testing at the first race of the season, to be fair. So, did they at least take part in Australia? Oh, I'm getting a bit sick and tired of this, I'm not gonna lie. However, both cars qualified for the Malaysian Grand Prix. And then, well, the unimaginable happened. With their HRT starting towards the back, no surprise, and with it being a wet race, they took a gamble. They started on a full wet tyre whilst everyone else started on inters. As the rain got heavier and heavier and drivers figured out that full wets were the way to go and started diving into the pit lane for them, it happened.
You are currently P10.
A HRT running in the points. It was almost a miracle.
That's a new position for us, eh?
Bruh.
So, was the HRT dream about to come to fruition? Well, the race got red flagged because of poor visibility and bunched the field up together again, and well, we don't expect Narain to keep the faster midfield cars behind him and some of the front runners too. So how did the rest of the race go for him?
For position, Carter Kane wasn't a back marker to be lapped.
Bruh.
And Jensen had to return to the pits.
Yikes! Surely he just stayed out of controversy for the rest of the race and gave HRT a respectable finish that would benefit them in the Constructors' Championship at the end of the season.
But Vettel was another driver to tangle with Carter Kane. He ended up with a puncture.
Bruh.
And that was probably the highlight of HRT and F1, to be totally honest with you. And as for the rest of the season, well, despite improving their car, the Mauritius and the Caterhams also improved, and it ultimately left them as the slowest car on the grid. That, combined with financial issues again, meant that HRT finished last in the Constructors' Championship, 12th and last. Oh, and there was also the Rosberg crash at Abu Dhabi. The team's financial issues, however, were to rear its ugly head once again, as the team needed to find a buyer before the 30th of November 2012, which was the date the 2013 entry fees had to be paid by. Ultimately, the team shut up shop, with their assets sold to Theo Martin, with Martin intending to race the cars in the Euro Boss Series. That same series that this individual won in 2017.
Last year, we've got another car off the road, so the tow is very, very intense. It's a Mahavir Raghunathan off the road, and despite it being a street circuit, it is a track where they lean towards a low downforce setup because of the effect of that slipstream. Right now, Mahavir Raghunathan, the Indian driver, will be thinking about trying to get out of turn number 2. Might need the marshal's help, like we saw earlier on from Nikita Mazepin. And this is time for Austin Powers bingo, I think it is. We mention this every single year. Some of the roads, it is not very easy to get out if you go in at the wrong angle. Callum Ilott showed us how to do it a few moments ago. It looks like a 15-point turn.
One eternity later.
Lando Norris. Oh, I tell you what, he might be about to get out of turn 2. Don't stall it now after all that work. Back out onto the circuit goes Mahavir Raghunathan.
So, is it fair to conclude that HRT were doomed from the start? Yes. Whilst they were enticed by a cost cap that ultimately never came to fruition and screwed them over, the reoccurring theme of finances meant it was virtually impossible for the team to make any significant progress. Because of those finances, the cars were that slow, and ultimately they were part of the reason that the 107% rule in qualifying was reintroduced. Additionally, as mentioned before, the 4 drivers used in 2010 showed how desperate they were for money with that revolving door of pay drivers ultimately. Oh, and failing to turn up to any pre-season tests? Yeah. So we come back to the question, is HRT the worst team in Formula 1 history? In recent years, yes. Whilst Marussia and Caterham, whilst they weren't any better, they ultimately had a longer lifespan in Formula 1. And Marussia even scoring a point at Monaco in 2014 with a stunning drive by the late Jules Bianchi. But there have been other teams in the past that you could definitely argue were worse than HRT. MasterCard Lola, Coloni, Andrea Moda, or the Life F1 team. But in recent years, and especially in my time since watching the sport as a 7-year-old in 2004, Hispania Racing, HRT, they are most definitely the worst team I have seen in Formula 1. Well, that's my opinion. Hispania Racing, HRT, the worst team in Formula 1 history. Let me know down in the comments below if you agree with me or not. And have a good rest of the day. And peace!